So tell us your name, position and current research or teaching.
My name is Elisabeth Sandler. I am a PhD candidate here at the Sociology Department. I'm supervised by Professor Sarah Franklin and Dr. Marcin Smietana. And I'm really excited to continue my work on lgbtQ+ disclosure in my PhD work. So last year I was in the full-time position of the researcher for the Q+ at CAM initiative and research project on Out at Cambridge. And it was such meaningful and really touching data that I decided to change my PhD topic. And I'm now trying to conceptually and methodologically challenge the coming out concept a bit more, which means I will also explore it among heterosexual identifying people as well as LGBTQ+. That will be interesting. And I'm a research assistant as well for ReproSoc and Q+, and MCR LGBTQ+ rep at Newnham, and I'm teaching in 3 countries right now. In SSRMP here, I teach on qualitative research methods, as well as in Hamburg, in Germany, and in Austria, in Innsbruck.
Why do you research queer studies?
So I was always interested in topics, and so I did my first degree in Austria, and whenever someone mentioned anything on same-sex parenting, I thought, oh, that's really fascinating, but I never saw myself doing it. I don't know why. And then I did my first master's at Oxford, and I remember very vividly that I had to find a topic, I had to change my research topic, and I was desperately trying to find one. And I had this really meaningful talk with a very advanced PhD student at the time who told me, why don't you look into parenting gender roles among same-sex parents? That would be really interesting. And I was like, that would be so interesting. And I just had come out a month before myself, so there was a personal interest as well. So that's how I started, and I continued the research on parenting gender roles among same-sex parents in Cambridge in my second master's, and then did the Out at Cambridge study. So this is how I got into it. I'm deeply grateful to this 5-minute conversation with this PhD student. Sometimes things like that just change your life. Yeah.
Have you ever faced any challenges in your queer research or teaching?
Mostly I haven't, and I am, on the one hand, I'm grateful for that, because I am aware that not everyone is fortunate enough to have a very supportive and accepting academic environment. On the other hand, I feel very strongly for not being grateful as if that was something extraordinary or should be something extraordinary, because I do believe it shouldn't. So yes, I'm grateful to be really supported, and that so many people around me in this lovely environment I am here at Cambridge really love the topics I chose to do and challenge my thoughts so I can develop things further. But then also I don't want to give people who are just decent human beings the credit for being exceptional. So I think this should be the norm. I remember one situation though. So when we launched the Out at Cambridge study, I was on a panel, and as the researcher, I talked about the research project, obviously. And after that, I had a really nice discussion with a colleague of mine. And then one of the attendees came up to us, and we started this conversation, the 3 of us. And this person turned to my male-identifying friend, saying how extraordinary the research was, and basically thanking him for all the work he's done, for all the sensitivity he put into doing this research. And I was just standing there and thinking, well, isn't that interesting? So being mansplained and maybe underestimated, I have definitely experienced that even within my own community, so LGBTQ+ people, but also academic community. And I think that's a good sign for intersectionality, and that there are still hierarchies and prejudices even within our community. So this is the only thing I remember in terms of being challenging.
Why is it important to have a queer curriculum?
Well, first of all, I know that from having done the research on the Out at Cambridge study, it really makes a massive difference to students whether they see or not see themselves represented in the curriculum. And I do think I have actually quite a lot of queer students in my classroom sometimes as well. I remember this one really touching quote where someone I interviewed, this person said, being LGBTQ+ has given me something rather than taking something away from me. And I think this is really beautiful, actually heartbreakingly beautiful, and it captures something. This is the first reason, and it has been talked about a lot. The second one, though, why it really, really matters for the context of qualitative research methods or research methods in general, I do believe that it makes my students better qualitative researchers. So it helps me doing my job better in a way. And I think it makes them better qualitative researchers in two ways. First of all, it helps them putting themselves aside. If students see and are aware of different experiences and diversity around them, it helps them putting themselves aside temporarily for the research process. And this is really key in order to capture the unique experiences and voices and meaning people give to things that are beyond their own, basically. So qualitative research has an emic focus, which means we're interested in the perspectives of our participants. And I think you can only truly capture those if you put yourself temporarily aside, and being aware of diversity helps. Secondly, it is really important to be sensitive and respectful in a qualitative research setting. We interact with human people on a very deep level. Often, I think qualitative research interviews get compared to with therapy sessions. And I had discussions with many people, what's the difference, what's the similarity? So we ask really deep questions and very personal things get addressed in qualitative research. So it is really important to choose your words wisely and kindly and not to assume anything. So from a research ethics point of view, this is really key. It also, though, helps the results of your research, basically, because if people feel welcomed, if people feel safe and accepted and respected for who they are, they trust you more, you will basically, I experienced that many times, you will end up with better data. So in these two ways, it really, really matters to create a curriculum. It will help my students to become better researchers, help me doing the job better. But also generally, I want them to be kind people.
How do you queer the curriculum?
So, because I teach on research methods, it might not seem as obvious as if I taught on gender or was doing queer theory. It would be really easy to bring a queer perspective in that way. But people are sometimes surprised how easy it is to also create a curriculum in a quite neutral topic like that. So what I do, from a pedagogical point of view, I really like to bring loads of materials from my own research into the classroom so students see how research can be done. And with that, they engage with a lot of data as well. So you hear the voices of the participants. It's not just I tell them about it. They really read the experiences in the words chosen by the participants. And normally that does something to people. It forms this connection, this really beautiful connection. So this is one way to engage with queer voices in the teaching situation. Another thing is that I'm really interested in creative methodologies, and normally within lgbtQ+ research, there are really good examples. So I bring in authors that are queer themselves or do queer studies, just because they provide really valuable points to my teaching as well. Another way is I'm really sensitive to the language I use. So I try to be a role model in using gender-neutral language, which is particularly relevant to German-speaking countries. In German, everything is gendered. So to use gender-neutral language to avoid heteronormative language, and sometimes I also jokingly call out authors or like other research examples if I see that, kind of point it out. And so that is one thing. The second thing is I expect sensitive, respectful language from my students as well. So it's one of my marking criteria that they use inclusive language. And in the feedback of the essays, they will get a positive remark if they do it, or they will be called out in it if not, because I think it's a form of respect to others, and for the things I mentioned before, it's important as a researcher, whether you're LGBTQ+ or not, it's important to be respectful of that. And then just bringing diversity into all my materials, basically, whenever I use an image or video. I remember I discussed film elicitation as one of the stimulis in interviews with my students, and I couldn't find hardly any literature on that. So I showed them a YouTube video kids react to, and it was to In a Heartbeat, the short movie. So I showed it to my Austrian and German students and was really curious to see a reaction, but there wasn't any, which is good. But kind of exposing people to diversity, and that doesn't just mean LGBTQ+. Diversity, if I have a photo or image of people, to kind of try to show a diversity from the backgrounds they're coming from, not to that everyone is white, for example, maybe bring disabilities as well. So just make diversity more visible, because diversity will help all sorts of diversity. And the last one is pronouns. So I use pronouns in my email signature, and that led to one student asking why I'm doing that, which then again led to a really valuable, interesting discussion on why things like that matter. So I think tiny things like that come a long way, and they add up. They definitely add up and help creating a certain atmosphere as well. And it is really meaningful to create a curriculum to me personally, because I saw such change in my students, and most of them have to write a research proposal at the end, or an ethics approval form, in order to implement their empirical work, basically. And I have to approve that in Austria and Germany. So I saw words like cisgendered, or two students, one was interested in researching people's experiences around periods, the other one about aesthetic expressions of the vulva, and they did not recruit for women in their inclusion criteria. They worded it very neutrally and inclusively, which made me very happy, and that was represented in the grade as well.
Great. Good. Perfect.
Yeah, happy?
Yeah,
okay.